The crimson sunset painted the sky above Mineral Point, Wisconsin, as Samuel Daniels rode back to his ranch after another grueling day. The year was 1876, and the once thriving mining town was beginning to fade as the local lead mines yielded less with each passing season. Samuel's weathered face, bronzed from years under the western sun, showed signs of concern that went beyond his daily struggles as a rancher. "Something ain't right in town," he muttered to his horse, a sturdy palomino named Buck. He'd seen too many closed doors and drawn curtains, too many hollow-eyed townsfolk moving with unusual lethargy. The sprawling Daniels Ranch came into view as Samuel crested the final hill. 300 acres of good Wisconsin pastureland, hard-won through 15 years of backbreaking work. The two-story farmhouse stood proud against the darkening sky, lamplight already glowing from the kitchen window where his wife of 12 years would be preparing supper. Jessica Daniels née Calloway looked up from the stove when she heard the familiar creak of the front door. At 32, she remained as beautiful as the day Samuel had first seen her, though lines of worry had begun to etch themselves around her expressive blue eyes. "You're late," she said, but her tone held no accusation, only relief. "I was starting to worry." Samuel hung his hat on the peg by the door and crossed the room to kiss his wife's forehead. "Stopped by the general store. Martha Watson says her husband's taken ill with the same fever that's got the Millers and the Hendersons." Jessica's hand stilled over the pot she was stirring. "That's 4 families now. 5. Doc Peterson's wife is down with it too." A heavy silence settled between them. Jessica ladled stew into 2 bowls and carried them to the table where Samuel had already seated himself. "What's Doc saying about it?" Samuel shook his head, taking a spoonful of the hearty beef stew. "He's baffled. Says it starts with a fever and weakness, then moves to the lungs. The coughing's the worst part, he says. Blood sometimes." Jessica paled. "That sounds like consumption." "That's what I thought too, but Doc says it moves too fast. 3 days from first symptoms to—" Samuel couldn't finish the sentence. "Dear Lord." Jessica reached across the table for her husband's hand. The Daniels had no children of their own, not for lack of trying. A stillborn son 8 years ago had been their only brush with parenthood, and the wound still ached in both their hearts. "We should ride into town tomorrow," Samuel said after a moment of contemplation. "See if there's anything we can do to help." Jessica nodded, but a flicker of fear crossed her face. "Samuel, if this is contagious, then we'll be careful," he assured her, squeezing her hand. "But we can't just sit out here safe while folks in town suffer." They finished their meal in thoughtful silence, the crackling fire in the hearth the only sound aside from the occasional clink of spoons against bowls. The next morning dawned gray and cool, a hint of early autumn in the air despite it being only late August. Samuel and Jessica set out for town in their wagon after leaving instructions with their ranch hands, Miguel Fuentes and his son Carlos, to manage the cattle and horses. Mineral Point looked like a ghost town when they arrived. Main Street, usually bustling with activity, was nearly deserted. The few people they saw hurried about their business with scarves or handkerchiefs pressed to their faces. They stopped first at Doc Peterson's office, finding the physician haggard and red-eyed from lack of sleep. "Samuel, Jessica," he greeted them wearily, "I'd advise you to return to your ranch. This illness is spreading faster than wildfire." "That's why we're here, Doc," Samuel said firmly. "To help." Doc Peterson ran a trembling hand over his face. "I've lost 8 patients since yesterday. 8. And there's nothing I can do except try to ease their suffering." Jessica gasped. 8. "Who?" The doctor listed names, each one a knife to the heart for the Daniels, who knew every family in and around Mineral Point. The Wilsons had lost their father and youngest daughter. The elderly Havershams had passed within hours of each other. Young Timothy Walsh, only 19 and recently married, had succumbed just before dawn. "What about children?" Jessica asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Doc Peterson's shoulders slumped. "3 lost already. I fear there will be more." "The orphanage at the edge of town is overwhelmed. Sister Margaret sent word this morning that she's fallen ill herself, and there's only one healthy nun left to care for 20 children." Samuel and Jessica exchanged a look, an entire conversation passing between them without a word spoken aloud. "We'll take them," Jessica said suddenly. "I beg your pardon." The doctor blinked in confusion. "The children," Samuel clarified. "We have the space at the ranch, fresh air, clean water from our well. If this illness spreads through close quarters, getting them out of town might be their only chance." Doc Peterson stared at them for a long moment. "You understand what you're offering? Some of these children may already be infected. You'd be putting yourselves at risk." "We understand," Jessica said firmly. The doctor's expression softened. "I always knew you two had hearts of gold. Let me give you some precautions to take. Boil all drinking water, wash your hands frequently, and try to keep any children showing symptoms separate from the others." After receiving more detailed instructions and gathering supplies of medicines and bandages, the Daniels headed toward St. Mary's orphanage at the eastern edge of town. The small, weathered building looked even more dilapidated than Samuel remembered. A young nun, Sister Claire according to her introduction, greeted them at the door with visible relief when they explained their purpose. "God has sent you," she said simply, leading them inside where children of various ages huddled in the main room. Some played half-heartedly with toys, while others simply sat staring vacantly at nothing, too shocked by recent events to behave as children should. "How many are showing symptoms?" Jessica asked quietly. 5 in the back room," Sister Claire responded. "I've tried to keep them separate, but—" She gestured helplessly at their cramped surroundings. Samuel surveyed the children. The oldest appeared to be around 16, a tall boy with dark hair who stood protectively near a group of younger ones. The youngest was a toddler of perhaps 2, clutching a ragged cloth doll. "We'll need to make 2 trips," Samuel decided. "We'll take the healthy ones first, then come back for those who are ill." Sister Claire nodded gratefully. "I'll help prepare them for travel." Within an hour, they had 15 children loaded into their wagon. The oldest boy, who introduced himself as James, helped maintain order among the younger ones. "What about Tommy and the others?" he asked Samuel, glancing back at the orphanage as they prepared to depart. "We'll come back for them soon as we get you all settled," Samuel promised, though his heart ached at the thought of leaving any behind, even temporarily. The journey back to the ranch was solemn. Some of the younger children cried quietly, while the older ones maintained a stoic silence that seemed wrong for their age. Jessica sat in the back of the wagon with them, offering comfort where she could. Miguel and Carlos were visibly surprised when the wagon returned laden with children, but they quickly sprang into action, helping unload the youngsters and leading them into the house. "We'll need to prepare the barn loft for some of the older boys," Samuel told his foreman. "And the storage room off the kitchen can hold some of the little ones." "Sí, Señor Daniels," Miguel replied without hesitation. "My wife will come from our cabin to help Señora Daniels with cooking." Jessica was already organizing the children, assigning sleeping spaces and setting the older ones to helping the younger ones settle in. She moved with a natural efficiency that made Samuel's heart swell with pride and a touch of sadness. She would have been such a wonderful mother. There was no time to dwell on might-have-beens, however. Samuel needed to return to town for the remaining children. He set out alone after extracting a promise from Jessica to be extremely careful around any children who started showing symptoms. The orphanage seemed quieter when he returned. Sister Claire met him at the door, her face even more drawn than before. "We've lost little Amelia," she said softly. "An hour ago." Samuel removed his hat, holding it against his chest. "I'm sorry. The others are holding on, but Tommy's fever is very high." They moved quickly to prepare the remaining 5 children for transport. Samuel wrapped each one carefully in blankets despite the relatively mild temperature, worried about their weakened conditions. As he lifted 6-year-old Tommy, the boy's skin burned against his hands like a brand. The child's breathing came in ragged gasps, his small chest heaving with the effort. "Hang on, son," Samuel murmured. "We're going to get you somewhere quiet and clean." The return journey was made with painstaking care, Samuel driving the wagon as slowly as possible to avoid jostling his fragile passengers. By the time they reached the ranch, dusk was falling, and lanterns had been lit in all the windows of the house. Jessica rushed out to meet them, her face paling when she saw the condition of the children. "Quickly, bring them to the south bedroom. I've prepared it as an infirmary." The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Samuel and Jessica barely slept, taking turns sitting with the sick children while also trying to care for and reassure the healthy ones. Miguel's wife, Alina, proved invaluable, cooking meals for everyone and helping tend to the youngest children. News from town grew increasingly grim. Doc Peterson sent word via a ranch hand that 17 more had died, including the mayor and his entire family. The town council had imposed a quarantine, with no one allowed to enter or leave Mineral Point except for medical purposes. On the 4th day, little Tommy's fever broke. The moment when his eyes opened clear and focused for the first time in days, Jessica burst into tears of relief. "You're at our ranch," she told him when he looked around in confusion. "I'm Mrs. Daniels." "Where's Sister Margaret?" the boy asked weakly. Jessica hesitated, then decided on honesty. "She's sick too, Tommy, but Doc Peterson is taking good care of her in town." The truth, which Jessica kept from the child, was that Sister Margaret had passed the previous day. Doc Peterson's last message had included that somber news, along with word that the illness seemed to be showing signs of abating in those who had survived the first week. By the end of the 2nd week, they had lost 2 more children to the illness, but the remaining 3 who had been sick were recovering slowly. Among the healthy children, only 2 had developed symptoms, and both were now on the mend. It seemed the decision to remove them from the crowded conditions of the orphanage had indeed saved lives. As for the town, nearly 40 people had perished, almost half the population of Mineral Point. Businesses remained closed, families were devastated, and a pall hung over the community that would take years to lift. One evening, as Samuel and Jessica sat on the porch watching the children play in the yard, a sight that would have been unimaginable just weeks before, Jessica broached a subject that had been on both their minds. "What happens to them now, Samuel, when the crisis is over?" Samuel reached for her hand, his calloused fingers entwining with hers. "I've been thinking about that. The orphanage lost Sister Margaret and another nun. They won't be able to take all of them back." "No," Jessica agreed, watching as James organized a game of tag among the younger children. The transformation in the boy over the past 2 weeks had been remarkable. Once sullen and withdrawn, he now showed natural leadership and a protective instinct toward the others. "We could keep some of them," Samuel said carefully, gauging his wife's reaction. "Not all, we couldn't manage that many." "But a few." Jessica's eyes filled with tears. "I was hoping you'd say that." The sound of hoof beats interrupted their conversation. They turned to see Doc Peterson riding toward the ranch, his medical bag strapped to his saddle. "Doc," Samuel greeted him, striding across the yard to help the older man dismount. "What brings you all the way out here?" "Came to check on my patients," the doctor said, eyeing the playing children with evident satisfaction. "And to bring news. The quarantine's been lifted. The worst is over." Relief washed over Samuel. "That's good to hear. How many in total?" Jessica asked quietly, having joined them. Doc Peterson's expression sobered. 43. Mostly the very young and the elderly, but we lost plenty in their prime too." They stood in silence for a moment, honoring the dead. "And what of the survivors?" Samuel finally asked. "The town. We'll rebuild," Doc Peterson said firmly. "Those who remain are already cleaning up, reopening shops. Life goes on, Samuel. It has to." The doctor stayed for supper, marveling at the organized chaos of feeding 20 children. Afterward, he examined each child who had been ill, pronouncing them well on the road to recovery. "You've done a miraculous thing here," he told the Daniels as he prepared to leave. "These children would likely have perished in town." "We did what anyone would have done," Samuel said modestly. "No," Doc Peterson contradicted him. "Not everyone would open their home to orphans during a deadly outbreak. Most would think only of protecting themselves." After the doctor left, Samuel and Jessica gathered the children in the main room of the house. Many of the younger ones had already grown attached to the Daniels, running to Jessica for comfort when they scraped a knee or seeking Samuel's approval when they completed a chore. "We have something to discuss with all of you," Samuel began, looking around at the faces that had become so familiar in such a short time. "The illness in town has passed," Jessica continued gently. "And soon, decisions will need to be made about where you'll all live." Anxious murmurs spread among the children. Little Tommy clutched Jessica's skirt, his face crumpling at the thought of leaving. "The orphanage will reopen," Samuel explained, "but Mr. and Mrs. Daniels have been thinking. We'd like some of you to stay here with us, permanently." The room erupted in a mixture of exclamations and questions. James raised his hand, and the other children quieted immediately, evidence of the respect they'd developed for him. "How many can stay?" he asked pragmatically. Samuel and Jessica exchanged a glance. "We think we can manage 5, Samuel answered. "We wish it could be all of you, but we need to be realistic about what we can provide." "The youngest should stay," James said immediately. "Tommy, Sarah, and the little ones." Samuel was struck by the boy's selflessness. "What about you, James? Would you want to stay?" The boy looked startled, as if the possibility hadn't occurred to him. "Me, but I'm almost 16. In a couple of years I'd be out on my own anyway." "That's true," Jessica said gently, "but we could use your help with the ranch. Samuel could teach you everything about cattle and horses. You could have a future here if you wanted it." James stared at them, speechless for perhaps the first time since they'd met him. The discussion continued late into the evening, with Samuel and Jessica explaining that they would need time to make legal arrangements and ensure that those who returned to the orphanage would be well cared for. No decisions needed to be made immediately. Later that night, after the children were asleep sprawled across every available surface in the house, Samuel found Jessica standing at the window, gazing out at the moonlit pastures. "Having second thoughts?" he asked softly, coming to stand behind her. She leaned back against his chest, shaking her head. "Not at all. Just thinking about how quickly life can change. A month ago it was just the two of us, and I'd made my peace with that. Now we're figuring out how to be parents to 5 children," Samuel finished, wrapping his arms around her waist. "At least," Jessica amended with a small laugh. "You saw how Tommy was clinging to me. I don't think he's going to let us send him anywhere." Samuel chuckled, the rumble in his chest comforting against Jessica's back. The boy has good taste in mothers. The comment, innocent as it was, brought tears to Jessica's eyes. Do you really think I can be a good mother, Samuel, after all this time wondering? He turned her to face him, his expression serious in the moonlight. Jessica Daniels, I have never been more certain of anything in my life. These children adore you already. You were born for this role, even if the path to it wasn't what we expected. She buried her face against his chest, allowing herself a moment of emotion before straightening with renewed determination. We should speak with Doc Peterson about the legal aspects, and the new priest, once one arrives to replace Father Michael. Always thinking ahead, Samuel said admiringly. We'll ride into town tomorrow, see how things stand. The next day dawned bright and clear, a perfect late summer morning. Samuel and Jessica left James in charge of the other children, with Miguel and Alina promising to check in throughout the day. Mineral Point looked vastly different from their last visit. Though the streets were still quieter than normal, people moved about with purpose, cleaning, repairing, and rebuilding. Black crepe hung from many doors, a somber reminder of the losses sustained, but there was a sense of cautious renewal in the air. At the law office, they found Herbert Wilson, the town's only attorney, working by lamplight despite the brightness outside. His own windows were draped in black. He had lost his wife and youngest daughter to the illness. Samuel, Jessica, he greeted them, his voice hollow but professional. What brings you to town? They explained their situation and their desire to legally adopt 5 of the orphan children. Herbert nodded slowly. It can be arranged, though it will take time to process the paperwork through the territorial courts. In the meantime, I can draw up guardianship papers that will give you temporary legal authority. What about the others? Jessica asked. The ones who will return to the orphanage. Sister Claire is staying on. The diocese in Milwaukee is sending 2 more nuns next week. They'll reopen St. Mary's as soon as the building has been thoroughly cleaned and fumigated. As they left the law office with the temporary guardianship papers in hand, Samuel and Jessica encountered Doc Peterson on the street. I was hoping to see you too, he said. I've been thinking about your situation with the children. We've just arranged temporary guardianship for 5 of them, Samuel explained. The doctor nodded approvingly. That's excellent. But what about the others? I worry about sending them back to the orphanage, even with new staff. That building was never adequate. What are you suggesting, Doc? Jessica asked. The town council met yesterday. There's been some discussion about establishing a proper children's home, not an orphanage in the old sense, but a place where children could live in something closer to a family setting, with education and training for future employment. Samuel and Jessica exchanged an interested glance. The problem, Doc Peterson continued, is location. The town itself has too many associations now, and we'd need someone with experience caring for children, someone the youngsters already trust. You're thinking of our ranch, Samuel said, catching on quickly. Just the eastern portion, Doc Peterson clarified. The council could purchase it from you at a fair price, of course, and build a proper facility. The children could still see you regularly, which would ease the transition. Jessica's mind raced with possibilities. We could help oversee it, perhaps, at least until it's fully established. That was my thought exactly, the doctor agreed. The council was planning to approach you formally next week, but I thought I'd test the waters first. Samuel considered the proposition carefully. The eastern section of their property was primarily grazing land that they could afford to part with, especially for such a cause. And the idea of keeping all the children nearby, even if not under their direct care, was immensely appealing. "We'll need to discuss the details," he said finally, "but tell the council we're receptive to the idea." The doctor beamed. "I had a feeling you would be. Oh, and one more thing, James." "What about him?" Jessica asked, suddenly concerned. "He came to see me before the outbreak, asking about apprenticing. The boy has a keen mind and gentle hands. He'd make an excellent physician someday." Samuel smiled, thinking of the boy's natural leadership and compassion. "That doesn't surprise me at all." "If he's agreeable," Doc Peterson continued, "I'd like to take him on as a proper apprentice once he turns 16. He could split his time between your ranch and my practice." "We'll discuss it with him," Jessica promised, thrilled at the prospect of James having such an opportunity. They completed their business in town, stopping to speak with the bank manager about financing improvements to their home to accommodate 5 additional family members. By mid-afternoon, they were heading back to the ranch, their minds whirling with plans and possibilities. The children were eagerly awaiting their return, bombarding them with questions about the town, and when decisions would be made about their futures. That evening, after supper, Samuel and Jessica called James aside for a private conversation. "We've been speaking with Doc Peterson," Jessica began once they were seated in Samuel's small office. James looked nervous. "Is something wrong? Is one of the little ones sick again?" "No, nothing like that," Samuel assured him. "The doc mentioned that you'd spoken to him about becoming a doctor yourself someday." The boy flushed slightly. "It was just a thought. I know it takes years of schooling and lots of money." "James," Jessica interrupted gently, "Doc Peterson wants to take you on as his apprentice when you turn 16. He believes you have what it takes to become an excellent physician." James stared at them in disbelief. He does, Samuel confirmed, "and we agree with him. We've seen how you care for the younger children, how you notice when something's not right. But what about staying here, you said?" James trailed off, conflicted. "This would be your home," Jessica clarified. "You'd live here with us, help on the ranch when you can, but also spend time learning from Doc Peterson. The best of both worlds." The boy's eyes filled with tears that he quickly blinked away. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to decide right away," Samuel told him. "Think about it, talk to Doc Peterson next time he visits. But know that whatever you choose, you have a place with us for as long as you want it." James nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. "There's something else we want to discuss with you," Jessica continued after giving him a moment to compose himself. "The town council is considering purchasing the eastern section of our ranch to build a proper children's home. All the other children from St. Mary's would live there, close enough that you could visit them whenever you wanted." "Really?" Hope bloomed on James's face. "We wouldn't be split up." "Not if this plan goes forward," Samuel confirmed. "And Mrs. Daniels and I would help oversee the home, at least at first." For the first time since they'd known him, James threw his arms around both of them, hugging them tightly. "Thank you," he whispered, "for everything." Over the following weeks, plans accelerated. The town council formally purchased 20 acres of the Daniels' eastern property and began construction on what would become the Mineral Point Children's Home. Designed with input from Samuel and Jessica, the facility would include dormitory-style housing separated by age and gender, a schoolroom, dining hall, and workshops where older children could learn trades. Meanwhile, Samuel and Jessica finalized their adoption of 5 children. James, who had enthusiastically accepted both their offer of a permanent home and Doc Peterson's apprenticeship. Tommy, who at 6 years old had already declared his intention to become a rancher, just like Pa. 4-year-old twins Sarah and Samuel Jr. A naming coincidence that delighted Samuel Sr. And 2-year-old Rose, the toddler with the cloth doll who had rarely left Jessica's side since arriving at the ranch. The legal process was expedited thanks to Herbert Wilson's connections and the exceptional circumstances. By October, the adoptions were official, and the Daniels family had expanded from 2 to 7 almost overnight. Adjusting to parenthood brought challenges the couple had never anticipated. Tommy's nightmares about the illness that had claimed his original family kept the household awake for many nights. The twins tested boundaries constantly, discovering the limits of their new parents' patience. Rose developed a habit of hiding whenever she felt overwhelmed, leading to frantic searches throughout the ranch house. And James, despite his maturity, struggled with accepting that he truly belonged, often pulling away just when he seemed to be settling in. "It's natural," Doc Peterson assured them during one of his regular visits. "These children have experienced profound loss and disruption. Trust takes time to build." "But how do we help them?" Jessica asked, her heart aching for each child's pain. "By doing exactly what you're doing," the doctor replied. "Providing consistency, affection, and patience. They'll come around." Slowly, imperceptibly at first, the children began to heal. Tommy's nightmares grew less frequent. The twins learned that testing boundaries didn't mean losing love. Rose gradually stopped hiding. And James, especially after beginning his apprenticeship with Doc Peterson, started to accept his place in the family. By Christmas, the transformation was remarkable. The Daniels' home, decorated with pine boughs and homemade ornaments crafted by the children, rang with laughter and excitement in a way that brought tears to Jessica's eyes. "This is what our house was always meant to sound like," she told Samuel on Christmas Eve as they placed simply wrapped gifts beneath the small tree in their parlor. He pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You were always meant to be surrounded by children, Jessica. I just wish it hadn't taken a tragedy to make it happen." "God works in mysterious ways," she murmured. "Those poor families in town, I grieve for them every day. But these children needed us, and perhaps we needed them even more." The Mineral Point Children's Home was completed just after the new year of 1877, a testament to the town's resilience and determination. The remaining 15 children from St. Mary's moved in, along with 5 more orphans from neighboring communities who had lost parents to the same illness. Jessica took on the role of educational director, spending 3 days a week teaching at the home. Samuel contributed by organizing agricultural training for the older boys, showing them how to care for livestock and grow crop skills that would serve them well in Wisconsin's farm-based economy. Spring brought new life to the ranch in more ways than one. The cattle birthed healthy calves, the kitchen garden sprouted tender green shoots, and Jessica discovered, to her astonished joy, that she was expecting a child of her own. She told Samuel on a mild April evening as they sat on the porch watching the children play a raucous game of tag in the yard. "A baby," he repeated, his voice hoarse with emotion. "You're certain?" "Doc Peterson confirmed it yesterday," she said, unable to keep the smile from her face despite her nervousness. "I'm about 3 months along." Samuel gathered her into his arms, mindful of little eyes watching from the yard. "Jessica Daniels, you continue to amaze me," he whispered against her hair. "Are you happy? With 5 children already, I worried you might think." "Happy doesn't begin to describe it," he interrupted. "We have room in our hearts for a dozen more if that's what God sends us." The news was received with mixed reactions by their adopted children. James and Tommy were immediately enthusiastic. The twins seemed confused but intrigued by the concept of a new baby. Rose, however, became clingy and tearful, clearly worried about being displaced in her mother's affections. "You'll always be my special Rose," Jessica assured her repeatedly, holding the little girl close. Having a new baby won't change how much I love you. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, much to everyone's relief. Jessica continued her work at the children's home, though she gradually reduced her hours as her condition became more evident. Samuel threw himself into preparing for the new arrival, building a cradle with his own hands and expanding the nursery that Rose would soon share with her new sibling. In late November, just as the first snows began to dust the Wisconsin landscape, Jessica went into labor. The children were sent to stay at the children's home under Sister Claire's supervision, while Doc Peterson attended the birth with Alina's experienced assistance. After 6 hours of labor, considerably shorter than her previous experience, Jessica delivered a healthy baby boy with a shock of dark hair and his father's strong lungs. "Joseph Samuel Daniels," she announced when the children were finally allowed to meet their new brother the following day. They gathered around the bed where Jessica reclined, the infant cradled in her arms. James, nearly 17 now and growing taller by the day, stood back slightly, allowing the younger ones the closest view. "He's so tiny," Tommy marveled, reaching out a cautious finger to touch the baby's hand. "You were that small once," Samuel told him with a smile. "Was I?" The boy looked doubtful. "Even smaller," Jessica assured him. "Joseph is a big, strong baby." Rose had been silent since entering the room, her eyes wide as she observed the newcomer. Finally, she asked in a small voice, "Can I hold him?" Jessica exchanged a glance with Samuel, who nodded encouragingly. "Come sit beside me on the bed," she instructed, "and I'll help you." With Samuel's guidance, Rose was positioned with pillows supporting her arms, and the baby was carefully transferred into her embrace. The little girl's face transformed with wonder as she gazed down at her baby brother. "Hello, Joseph," she whispered. "I'm your big sister Rose." In that moment, Jessica knew that everything would be all right. The family they had built, pieced together from tragedy and hope, had enough love to encompass them all. The winter passed in a blur of midnight feedings and domestic adjustments. Joseph proved to be an easy baby, rarely fussing unless genuinely uncomfortable. The older children adapted to his presence with surprising ease, each finding their own way to contribute to his care. James fashioned a mobile of carved wooden animals to hang above the cradle. Tommy appointed himself official guardian, solemnly checking on the baby throughout the day. The twins entertained Joseph with silly faces that soon drew his first smiles. And Rose, most touchingly of all, sang the same lullabies to him that Jessica had sung to her. By spring, a new routine had established itself. The Daniels Ranch operated smoothly despite the additions to the family, thanks in large part to James's increasing competence and Miguel's steadfast reliability. The children's home flourished as well, with 23 children now in residence, overseen by Sister Claire and 2 other nuns, with Jessica serving as educational consultant rather than daily teacher while Joseph was still so young. On a warm June evening in 1878, nearly 2 years after the illness that had changed everything, the Daniels hosted a gathering for the entire community. Long tables were set up in the ranch yard, laden with food prepared by Jessica, Alina, and several women from town. Children from the home mingled with the Daniels' children and others from Mineral Point. Their laughter, a healing balm for a community that had endured so much sorrow. Doc Peterson, whose health had been declining in recent months, sat in a place of honor, James attentive at his side. The boy, nearly a man now, had proven to be an exceptional apprentice, absorbing medical knowledge with remarkable speed and showing genuine compassion for patients. Samuel stood at the head of the main table, raising a glass as the sun began to set. The conversations quieted as people turned their attention to him. 2 years ago, he began, his deep voice carrying across the gathering, our community faced its darkest hour. We lost friends, neighbors, family members. For a time, it seemed Mineral Point might never recover. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd, heads nodding in somber remembrance. But look at us now, Samuel continued, gesturing broadly at the assembled townspeople. We've rebuilt. We've healed. We've grown stronger through supporting one another. Jessica, Joseph sleeping against her shoulder, moved to stand beside her husband. Tommy, Rose, and the twins quickly joined them, forming a tableau that brought tears to many eyes. My family, Samuel said, his voice thick with emotion, is living proof that blessings can emerge from tragedy. These children have brought more joy to our lives than we could have imagined, and through the children's home, we've been able to extend that blessing to others. Hear, hear, someone called, followed by applause that Samuel quieted with a raised hand. Today isn't just about celebrating our recovery, he explained. It's about announcing a new chapter. Doc Peterson, would you like to share the news? All eyes turned to the elderly physician who stood with James's assistants. After 43 years of serving Mineral Point, he announced, the time has come for me to retire. My health isn't what it was, and these old bones need rest. Concerned murmurs spread through the crowd. Doc Peterson had delivered most of them into the world, cared for their families through illness and injury. The thought of Mineral Point without him was unsettling. But, he continued with a smile, I'm not leaving you without medical care. James here has been my apprentice for nearly 2 years now. He's got a natural gift for healing and has already been accepted to medical college in Chicago starting this fall. James flushed with embarrassment as approving nods and comments circulated. Moreover, Doc Peterson added, I've arranged for a young doctor from Madison to take over my practice in the meantime. Dr. Howard will arrive next month, and I'll be staying on long enough to introduce him to everyone properly. The announcement was met with relief, though many still looked sad at the thought of losing their beloved doctor. And now, Samuel said, reclaiming attention, I'd like to propose a toast. To those we've lost, may their memories be a blessing. To those who have joined us, may they find love and belonging. And to Mineral Point, may our community continue to thrive for generations to come. Glasses were raised around the gathering, the late evening sunlight catching in the amber liquid as voices joined in a chorus of hear, hear. As the celebration continued into the night, with fiddle music eventually prompting dancing in the cleared area near the barn, Samuel and Jessica found a quiet moment together on the porch of their home. Did you ever imagine this? Jessica asked, leaning against her husband's side as they watched the festivities. Joseph slept peacefully in a bassinet beside them, while their other children danced and played with the town's children. Not in my wildest dreams, Samuel admitted. When we first heard about the illness in town, all I could think about was keeping you safe. Jessica nodded, remembering those frightening early days. And instead, we ended up with 5 adopted children, a baby of our own, and responsibility for 23 more at the home. Do you regret it? Samuel asked, though he already knew the answer. Not for a single moment, she replied firmly. These past 2 years have been the happiest of my life, despite all the challenges. Samuel tightened his arm around her shoulders. Mine too. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, content in each other's company and the knowledge of all they had built together. I've been thinking, Jessica said eventually, about the future. Oh, Samuel glanced down at her curiously. The children's home is running smoothly now. Sister Claire has proven to be an excellent administrator, with James leaving for medical school in the fall. You're thinking of having another baby, Samuel guessed, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Jessica laughed softly. Not immediately, though I wouldn't rule it out for the future. No, I was thinking about taking in more children here at the ranch. Samuel considered this. You mean adopting more, perhaps, or maybe fostering older children who struggle to find adoptive homes. Boys who could learn ranching from you, girls who could benefit from a family environment before they are of age to marry or seek employment. How many are you thinking? Samuel asked, his tone indicating openness to the idea. 2 or 3 to start with. The house is certainly big enough now with the additions we've made. Samuel nodded slowly. I think it's a fine idea. We could speak with Sister Claire about children at the home who might particularly benefit from living with a family. Jessica beamed at him, her heart full of love for this man who continued to walk beside her through every unexpected turn in their journey. You're a good man, Samuel Daniels. And you're an extraordinary woman, Jessica Daniels, he replied, bending to kiss her softly. The fiddle music swelled in the background as dusk deepened into night. Lanterns were lit around the yard, casting a warm glow over the celebration. Tommy rushed up to the porch, breathless with excitement. Pa, come dance. Mr. Wilson is showing everyone how they used to dance in Virginia. Samuel chuckled. Duty calls. Will you be all right with Joseph? Go, Jessica encouraged him. We're fine here. She watched as her husband allowed himself to be dragged into the circle of dancers, his tall figure standing out among the townsfolk. Tommy, not to be outdone, joined in with enthusiasm if not coordination, causing laughter to ripple through the onlookers. Rose appeared at Jessica's side, climbing onto the porch swing next to her. Is Joseph still sleeping? She asked, peering into the bassinet. Sound asleep, Jessica confirmed. Are you having fun, sweetheart? The little girl nodded, then leaned against Jessica's side with a contented sigh. I love our family. So do I, Rose, so do I. As Jessica sat with her daughter, her infant son sleeping nearby, and the rest of her family engaged in the festivities before her, she reflected on the strange, winding path that had led them here. The devastation of the illness had seemed like the end of so many things, but it had instead become the beginning of something beautiful. Their ranch, once a place of solitude where she and Samuel had nursed private sorrows, now teemed with life and purpose. The land that had sustained their cattle now sustained a growing family and a home for children who might otherwise have been lost in the system or separated from their siblings. From tragedy had come renewal. From loss had come abundance. From sorrow had come joy beyond measure. As the stars emerged in the clear Wisconsin sky, Jessica Daniels offered up a silent prayer of gratitude. For Samuel, her steadfast partner through it all. For their children, both adopted and biological, each one a unique blessing. For the community that had rallied and rebuilt. And for the knowledge that whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, they would face them together, with love as their foundation. In the years that followed, the Daniels Ranch became known throughout the region as a place of healing and hope. More children found their way there, some staying briefly, until permanent homes could be found, others remaining until adulthood, becoming as much a part of the family as those who had arrived during the epidemic. James completed his medical training and returned to Mineral Point, taking over Doc Peterson's practice after the old physician passed peacefully in his sleep in 1882. He never married, dedicating himself instead to the care of his community and maintaining close ties with the Daniels family that had given him his start in life. Tommy grew into a fine young man with Samuel's aptitude for ranching, eventually taking over the day-to-day operations as his adoptive father grew older. The twins found their respective callings, Samuel Jr. as a skilled carpenter who expanded the children's home when it outgrew its original building, and Sarah as a teacher, who continued her mother's educational mission. Rose, to everyone's surprise, developed a talent for business, opening a successful general store in Mineral Point that served as a hub for the growing community. And Joseph, joined eventually by two more biological siblings, inherited his parents' compassionate nature, ensuring that the Daniels' legacy of caring for those in need continued for generations. Samuel and Jessica remained at the heart of it all, their love for each other deepening with each passing year, each challenge weathered, each joy shared. The ranch house that had once echoed with the silence of their private grief became permanently filled with voices, laughter, and the beautiful chaos of family life. And on summer evenings, long after the epidemic had become a somber chapter in the town's history books rather than a raw wound, the elderly couple could still be found sitting together on their porch swing, watching the sun set over land that had witnessed their greatest sorrows and their greatest joys, grateful for the unexpected path that had led them home.